All right, welcome to another episode of Tuesday Talks. What's up, Dan?
Hey, what's going on, Harris? How you doing today?
Doing well, man. It's been some time since we did a Tuesday Talk. I feel like tons of Tuesdays have gone by.
There's been many Tuesdays. Actually, this hasn't been that long. I
Yeah,
think maybe
it was
one.
only last Tuesday.
Yeah, we'll make up for it. It's all good. It's been a lot happening too, in the world of just everything in the world in general. There's
Yeah.
a heck of a lot of stuff. I think before we even got on this podcast, we were chatting for a good half an hour on everything, and hopefully we can bring some of it up. If you notice behind me, for all of you guys watching and not just listening, this space is for rent. I'm offering it at a discount. Because anything right now that you put a sign up for rent goes pretty quickly. It's pretty crazy in this market. Even from a broker perspective, I'm noticing market rent report. So for those of you guys that don't know what a market rent report is, it's a report that you can order or we can order on behalf of a borrower that essentially an appraiser will go out there and determine what the approximate value of a property is for rental purposes. So let's just say, Harris, you've got a condo and you're like, Dan, I want to rent it out and I want to buy a new place. I don't want to sell it. Okay, we can do that. But the problem is you're living in it right now until you can buy a new place. So in some cases, you're not able to line up a renter in time to move and to get the new mortgage in order. So in those cases, the banks will accept a market rent report, and that report will just basically give you a general range of what the property could be rented for, and they use that to help qualify for your debt service ratios for qualifying purposes. So anyway, these rental reports, we've been doing a lot of them and just noticing that they're coming in a heck of a lot higher than what I had originally thought or what we've estimated it to be even with realtor input. So rental prices are up, vacancies down, and that's why my wall here and part of my office I'm renting out. Not renting. I'm not really renting it out, but
You know,
metaphorically, I
I asked
I
Dan
just
and
feel
Dan
that
said
I'm
no.
trying to.
So if one of you guys want it, get in touch.
Yeah, well, there was a rigorous 210-point inspection when it comes. Well, not inspection, but I'm sounding like I own a dealership. No, but it's yeah. There's a very lengthy interview process, and unfortunately failed, Harris.
Hmm.
So sorry. Um, yeah, so that's a big concern, and I did a YouTube video last week where we were talking about these alternative ways of living, these nomad, not necessarily nomadic, but they were communities. And Harris, you and I talked about this off camera. These communities that are self-sustaining. So there's one called the Boreal. What is it? The medieval. I just had it up on my screen a second
Let me
ago,
let me put it up.
but
Yeah.
it's the Boreal
Yeah.
Forest
I
Medieval
just put it up.
Village.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, did you? Right on. Yeah, so it's interesting because this community, I mean, they've got three projects. All three projects are sold out, but the idea is you would buy like a half acre plot. You're responsible for putting your own dwelling on it. I think lots were going for $4,000. It's in the middle of nowhere, Ontario, like northern Ontario, and the plan is to create not just a place that you could build a tiny off-grid cabin or whatnot, but create a community too with other like-minded individuals. So everything from growing your own food, health and the safety of the community, all of that would. It's almost like creating a new
Yeah.
tribe. And yeah, I mean, I definitely think since the pandemic, there's been more interest. There's definitely been more interest in things like sustainable living and tiny homes and living off grid. And you can even see trends on YouTube for all of these. Like there's a guy in Northern Ontario. It's not really Northern. So it's more like, you know, central Ontario, but my self-reliance, the guy's like north of Huntsville, and he started a channel where he's just building log cabins in the wilderness, him and his dog. And there's been so many sort of copycat channels that have come up that are some nature, and not just here in Ontario, but all over the world,
Yeah.
because I think that kind of like it spoke to us on some level of like we just want to have our own space. We want to put, want to escape from the insanity of all of this, and just it was very therapeutic, and it still is. And yeah, so we're starting to see people interested in actually pursuing that lifestyle. Now, I don't think it's a long-term solution for our problem with housing, but it's a solution nonetheless for some people.
Yeah. No, I mean, I do feel like sometimes people can feel trapped in buying whatever they can afford, and then only having so much space, and spending like every single waking hour trying to make sure you pay off the mortgage, especially where prices are going.
Dude, okay, it blows my mind, man. Like you'll have like people that are saving, literally saving every penny they possibly can. They come up with a down payment, and then they get blown out of the water because there's 15 other offers that have gone way over
Yeah.
asking, and it's deflating your confidence. And it's just simple as finding a roof, some shelter, a place of security to put over your head. And when you're looking at boxes in downtown Toronto where condominiums are selling for $750,000 or more for one plus den or one bedroom, and you're just like, how's a family supposed to survive? And yeah, I mean, we're seeing 20, what is it, year over year, it was like a 20% increase in home prices. The average across Canada is over $750,000 now. That's across Canada, and there's a lot of other areas of the country where the mean income, household income, is well below what we see here in the GTA. So
Yeah, yeah.
scary, man.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I look at it and I don't understand how working Canadians can ever like save enough to buy a house. I mean, if especially in the GTA,
Yeah.
if you're in the GTA, and what's the average house going for? Like 1.3, something like that, 1.4. I don't even know
Oh,
what it
yeah.
is.
Yeah. If we're talking like detached and semi-detached, probably somewhere around there, 1.3.
Yeah. So,
I mean, we just did an appraisal on a property in the GTA, and this place, and you go back 10 years, and maybe be worth 250,000. The appraisal came in at north of $800,000. It just shakes my head. It's unbelievable, this market. Um, yeah, even London, Ontario. There was a report this morning, or an article that came out saying that in the last 25 years, home prices in London, Ontario have tripled.
oh wow.
So, and I guarantee you that the majority of that increase has happened just in the last 5 years or so,
Yeah.
right? So,
I mean,
but what's happened to income?
yeah, and I feel like it's not if you look at it, prices going up, inflation is not uh, the worst thing. It's just that salaries aren't going up. It's not like our incomes have
Right.
tripled or quadrupled or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
it's like now, what is it now? And then the argument then becomes, well, you've interest rates have come down, so you can afford it. I'm thinking like, well, that doesn't really mean much to me because I would like to one day be able to own my house free and clear, right? Like it's
Mm,
actually even
mm,
worse, right? Interest rates. It's like if your house is worth 200 grand and you're paying 10% interest, if you make more money, you can actually pay it down a lot faster. Whereas if it's 800,000 and you're paying 1% of that, right? Like it's like you still have to, first of all, it's 1%
right.
of
Yeah.
a enormous amount. So it's not 1% of 200,000, it's 1% of 800,000. So it's already gone up like 3 or 4x, right? So if interest rates go
Yeah.
down or are divided by 4, they were 8% before, come down to 2, you're probably paying the same amount of interest because it's just the percentage is lower and but your loan is higher. So at what point can you actually pay everything down? I don't know. It gets difficult.
Yeah, it's a good question. And yeah, there's got to be a tipping point for all of this too. I know a lot of people, they point the finger at speculative buyers, investors, foreign buyers especially, Because if foreign buyers have to pay, what is it, 15% speculation tax or something, um, on property,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like a 15% commission for the government. Um, are they going to have they cracked down on it? What's the majority of buyers? Do they comprise of speculators and foreign investors? I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel
I don't know.
like
I don't know if they're really driving it.
I don't think that is what's driving it up. It's more like every single time, um, unfortunately, the economy's going towards a recession, which it's healthy to have a recession. It gets rid of bad debt. The G7 countries have come together and decided we never want to have a recession in the world again. And the way they do that is by just printing more money. And the way they can sustain that is by bringing down interest rates. And that just screws up the entire economy because now with lower interest
Right.
rates, people are going to be like, okay, I want to spend more money to buy my house because I can afford more. You know, if my payment is supposed to, if I can afford $5,000 worth of payment, it doesn't matter how much of it's going to principal and how much of it's going to interest. I can afford that much. If your interest rate goes down, automatically the prices are going to go up, right? And then
Right.
on top of that, though, when you're printing to make sure you don't go into a recession, price of everything is going up, right? Like price for food, for just the basic necessities, everything is going up. So it's like in the long run, I don't know. I feel like we need to have a recession, but and now when I look at it, it's like a recession at this point is going to be very painful because we should have had a recession in '08. Right? We should have had a recession, to frankly speaking, in 2019. COVID is a bad thing, 100%. But um, like pandemics are part of our like human reality. You can't try to print your way out of it. You're gonna pay for it one way or the
Right.
other, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's going to be a necessary contraction in the economy because people can't get to work because they're not feeling well, all right? And I'm not trying to say that we should get rid of, like, like I'm fine with people dying or whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we need to understand what is happening. For example, let's say during the pandemic, government doesn't print any money, doesn't give anybody any money, and people are losing jobs. What do you think's going to happen? Prices are going to come down. People can't afford to pay rent. They can't afford to pay that much rent. So what are people like? It's not like homeowners or like property owners or investors are just going to be um, yeah, it's fine. Well, you know what? I'm going to sit on an empty a property. They're going to have mortgages to pay. They have all these other things, and there's going to be a downward pressure. But instead, we printed it, and there was an upward pressure. Like, oh, these guys are flush with cash. We can ask for more rent.
Yeah. Yeah. It's dangerous. It's definitely a dangerous precedent here. Um, have we ever gone through this historically? Let's go back in time. Has there ever been a time that we've done this, or is this all just kind of, we moved away what, in the 70s from the gold standard, something like that?
Yeah. So I mean, we
Yeah.
were never on the gold standard. Like the way it worked was the U.S. dollar was on the gold standard, then everybody pegged their currency to
And
the
we were pegged to,
yeah.
yeah.
So it was like
Yeah.
an indirect kind of gold standard. And then when the U.S. kind of
Yeah.
got off of it, the G7 countries coordinate all of their kind of central banks at the helm of the Federal Reserve. I mean, they're very much the ones who are dictating everything, but they kind of coordinate the monetary supply within the economy. So since
Right.
then, we've had inflationary periods. In fact, the reason that the gold standard was kind of the U.S. dollar was taken out of the gold standard was because the U.S. started printing debt, and they realized that the currency that they had is essentially before it was an IOU for a certain amount of gold. So first they inflated the gold number, like, hey, it was before, like, it was X amount of ounces. Now really it's like it represent this like a lesser amount of gold. And then they just took it out when they realized, like, hey, people started panicking. They're like, the IOUs that the US is sending out, they don't have enough gold, so they started redeeming them. So then they were taken off.
Mm.
They're like, no, now we're just floating. And so that's like kind of the story behind it. But like it at that point, the U.S. is like, all right, well now that we're off, we can print as much as we can, which is why you've had
Yeah.
inflation on top of inflation, right? Like in the 80s, you had inflation, but then even in the States, I felt like there were better stewards in the Federal Reserve and the Treasury as well. So when Paul Volcker, and I think he died in 2019, the guy did some really like he made some policies that were not popular but very good for the economy. So when inflation hit 20%, what did he do? He brought interest rates up to 25%. And you have to break the back of inflation, which is not that easy once you're in that kind of spiral, right? And
Right.
very
Yeah.
unpopular, right? Like if he did that today, he'd get shot, right? But you had to do that to bring down inflation, and he did get it under control. So now we've got an insane amount of inflation, but the other issue is also there's so much government debt that if you bring up inflation, your tax receipts are not enough to pay that interest. The government has a mortgage as well because they borrowed all this money to develop the economy, but if you raise the interest, you're not going to be able to pay those your creditors, so you keep it artificially low. So it's not necessarily the market that's dictating it. Usually in a market, I mean, and you'd know more than I would, right? That the more a person gets debt a person has, the higher the interest rate, right? The lower the credit quality that
Mm.
person has. So
Hmm. You're scaring me, Harris. Uh, maybe we need to go to these medieval villages and just live out the rest of our natural lives, because it's yeah, it sound and you're right. Like it, at least from my perspective, when it comes to the credit worthiness of an individual, and you can extrapolate that into the credit worthiness of a country. If you're not able to meet your current obligations, why would additional debt be loaned to you? Uh, oh wow, that some crazy stuff, man. So, what do you think? What's the best way to hedge against this for the average Canadian?
average,
Is there any
yeah.
way? Yeah, because like we were just chatting, a couple of bags of chips or avocados or whatever you get from the grocery store now is like doubled in price. Uh, everything. The cost of goods, a basket of goods is way more expensive. Should we start growing everything from the ground up?
I mean,
you
I
know,
think the number one thing people need to like have in the West is a sense of like gratitude. I don't think we're
mm,
grateful enough, right? Myself included, for all the things that we have. Like if you think about it,
right.
man, like you wake up in the morning, right? And you've got a warm house, right? You don't really have to worry about like if you're gonna have food today. The only worry that you have is like, what am I gonna eat today? Your kitchen is filled with food. You open up your refrigerator filled with food, right? The irony of like the amount of wealth that we have is it's minus 20 degrees outside. We then pay to increase the temperature inside of our house so that like it's like 70 degrees Fahrenheit, whatever it is, 30, 27, whatever, 30, whatever it is, right? To keep warm. And then
Yeah,
you're paying then again to for your refrigerator to cool down everything. That's
yeah,
the irony of our existence. That's the luxury that people
yeah,
like don't really realize how crazy that is. That you can turn on the tap, have warm water, warm drinking water,
yeah,
right? Like if you
yeah.
went back 150 years, man, like the kings didn't even have that kind of stuff, man.
Yeah, dude, I was watching, when you go down one of these YouTube rabbit holes and you end up watching someone try to polish a rock for 2 hours. You're like, what happened to the time? So I got into one where it literally it went back to the turn of the last century, and then even further back to the 19th century on the average averaged what do you call it American, and what they had to do on a daily basis, from collecting the water to cleaning the clothes to keeping the fires stoked to preparing food in the house and bringing everything in. And you just look how far we've come in 100 years or so. And yeah, you're right, we take a lot of it for granted. Like on my mom's side, being West Indian from the
Yeah,
Caribbean, seeing my relatives and my uncles and aunts and how they live, how they lived and how they live
yeah,
currently, right? The idea of air conditioning is just insane. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not something that a lot of them live with. I remember going to one of my uncle's houses, and they had electricity. They didn't have running water. It was literally gravity fed. And there's no cold water because it's always hot there. So
Mm,
you have just warm
yeah.
water, and that's what you have to shower with and to do everything else with. Yeah, it's you have a point there. The gratification. I think it's so easy to go post a meme on Instagram about whatever's happening and how you're grateful
Yeah.
and put a quote or two, but to actually sit down and be grateful for what we have today and the type of how far we've come. I think
I mean,
yeah,
it's
I think
it's
it's
it's like
important.
living within your means, man. I feel like also, and you had brought this up
Mm.
prior to us kind of starting the podcast, was that like avocados have gone from like you had somebody that who was it? What was the story with the avocado price?
Yeah, there was someone that had mentioned I think it was on Reddit, and like they worked at a grocery store, and he had observed that the cost of avocados went from like 75 cents to something like 225
Mm,
each in a span of a few
yeah,
weeks, and
but
everyone started chiming in like, yeah, we've noticed this with so many other
and
things
and
too.
and yeah, that is bad. And I'm not trying to say we're not facing inflation. We definitely are. And the
Mm,
price of everything is going up. But what is the cost of having avocados delivered to your grocery store down the street
right.
year long,
Yeah.
year long, man? And it's not like, dude,
Yeah.
if you go to like developing countries, what I've seen is you have seasons. This is a good
Right.
season to
Yeah.
have this. It's not like I'm gonna have oranges year
Yeah.
long. It's gonna be this like 3 months, and it's like my dad especially, like, like this month they're just starting. Oh, they're not gonna be that great. This month is gonna be really good, and this month they're kind of tapering off. It's not like the best are left, or like he knows the cycles, and then okay,
Yeah.
well, when this
Yeah.
fruit ends, this fruit's gonna begin, and when that ends, this begin, and it's like organic, and it's like grown. I would argue locally, right? So it's like there's um a lot of like just manufactured almost reality that we have that we need to kind of get over.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. The first time I was kind of like mindful of that was, I think, like 10 years ago. I got into paleo dieting, Paleolithic way of
Yeah.
eating. And I read a book by Rob Wolf, and he probably still is, of the Paleolithic way of eating, and it's hunter gatherer style. And he explained through modern agriculture, we're starting to eat a lot of things that our bodies aren't tuned for, grains and obviously other things. But just as important is the seasonality of
Mm.
things. So you eat things as eat that way. So that's where I was like, yeah, you know what? Having a quarry in Canada, I mean, that's something you normally wouldn't be able to have. Um, but yeah, we have to be quite mindful. We have access to still, and yeah, it's the way things are going. Okay, recession's probably around the corner, but I think we can rein in a lot of our spending too. And I see this often when I'm looking at or any when you're qualifying a client, for example, and we go through sort of, okay, what's your affordability, what's everything look like, where's your down payment coming from, and you find out that there's a lot of ways that they could have reduced their discretionary spending,
Mm.
like you just Uber Eats every day or every couple of days or whatever it is you're paying for, that you could really just say, okay, well, we don't need to do this. It's more of a want than a
Mm.
need.
They've
Ah,
gamified it, right?
man.
It's like on your phone. Oh my God, what do you want at any point?
Oh
Do you want
yeah.
Chinese? Do you want Indian? Do you want a burger? Do you want healthy? Do you want locally grown? Do you want like whatever the hell you want? It's like cook at
Yeah.
home. It's healthier for
Yeah.
you. It's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
much healthier for you, and it's
But
cheaper.
you're not getting those points. You don't get
Yeah.
the gold status and all of those points, internet points. You can't redeem it for anything, I
Yeah.
don't think. But I mean, yeah, you're right. The gamification of everything from like dating, Tinder, the little swipey noise it would make to everything else, where it just gets people like just a little bit more, just back to the app, back to that process of using whatever it is you're using. Yeah, it's interesting. I think the next little while, as things sort of shake out and we see what happens, it's going to be an interesting time. That's for sure. You think we're done with this the COVID lockdowns and variants? I heard that Delta, no, what do they call it? The Omicron, Deltacron variant. It's like now a hybrid that's coming out in the UK, and we have to be mindful of it. I think China is going into another lockdown because things are starting to get out of control there again. I mean, but you mentioned this a little bit earlier in our podcast. That, this is just like part of living. Or maybe you mentioned it on the podcast, but the reality is that these pandemics and these things that we deal with on a biological level, we're always going to have to deal with this. So what's the best course of action? How do we do this without tanking economies and halting everything?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
We'll find out, man. We'll find out in the coming days and weeks. I'm excited to see.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, look, Harris, I appreciate you jumping on this one. This is interesting. I mean, there's so many things going on right now in the world. I like your idea of stepping back and just being grateful for what we have. I think that's a good message that I personally am going to be a little bit more mindful of. Anyway, thanks everyone for joining us today. You got anything else you wanted to add today?
Nope, that's it. Thanks, everyone. Take care, guys.
All right. Talk to you. See ya.